Again, those looks full of superiority and pity. I can't stand family gatherings, Paulina thought nervously, adjusting the collar of her blouse before entering her mother-in-law's apartment. Memories of the last meeting with Vera, her husband's brother's wife, swirled in her head. Every time it was the same. Sharp remarks, mocking glances, and endless questions about work, otherwise nothing. Today, though, she had a secret that none of the relatives knew about, not even her husband. Taking a deep breath, she rang the doorbell. Footsteps were heard, and Svetlana Ivanovna, her mother-in-law, appeared at the threshold, a woman with kind eyes but a weak character, completely submissive to her daughter's opinions. "Polinaka, finally, we've been waiting for you. Come in, dear," came from the living room, where voices could be heard. Paulina recognized among them Vera's sharp tone, laced with notes of superiority. Her heart started beating faster. "Calm down," Paulina told herself. "Today, I'm not that defenseless little lamb they can push around. And here's our unemployed little sister-in-law." Vera peeked out from the living room, giving Paulina an appraising look. "What? Still searching for yourself? Or have you finally decided to settle on my poor brother's neck?" Paulina felt the blood rush to her face. Mikhail, her husband, frowned, but he never intervened in the squabbles between his wife and his sister-in-law. Women's business, he'd say cowardly, distancing himself from the conflict. "Hello, Vera," Paulina replied calmly, walking into the living room. "How are you?" "Better than everyone," Vera declared with pride, demonstratively adjusting the expensive watch on her wrist. "Unlike some, I don't sit at home and sip tea." Paulina smiled silently. If you only knew, she thought. The table was already set. Her mother-in-law had laid out salads, appetizers, and hot dishes. Everyone sat around the table, and Paulina ended up across from Vera, who kept throwing mocking glances her way. "Well, tell us," Vera began, scooping some salad onto her plate. "How's our little housewife doing? Still actively searching for work?" "Everything's fine with me, thank you," Paulina replied, restrainedly. "Oh, come on," Vera pressed, unrelenting. "We're family. You can admit you just don't want to work. Many women choose that path, find a breadwinner, and sit at home." Mikhail shifted uncomfortably but stayed silent, clenching his fists onto the table. "Vera, dear," her mother-in-law began softly. "Not everyone has to, Mama. I'm just worried about our family's well-being," Vera interrupted with a forced smile. These days, one working person in the family can't survive, especially with Mikhail's salary. Paulina noticed her husband flinch at those words. He worked as an engineer in a small company, and his salary wasn't particularly high, but they managed, and Mikhail had never reproached Paulina for not working, at least not until recently. "You see, Paulina," Vera continued, sipping water from her glass, "in the modern world, a woman needs to be independent. Take me, for example. I've been a senior manager at Novatrade for 3 years now. Without false modesty, I'll say they really value me there. Just yesterday, I got a bonus." She paused, clearly savoring the moment. "In fact, they even offered me the position of head of a new department." Vera cast a triumphant glance around the table. "But I'm still thinking it over. Big responsibility, I'd have to hire subordinates, and I have high standards for people." She gave Paulina a meaningful look, not like some who can't even find a basic job. Paulina felt anger boiling inside her, but she only smiled faintly with the corners of her lips. "If you knew who your new boss will be, Vera, you'd bite your sharp little tongue," she thought, but she didn't say a word out loud. "My daughter's right," Vera's father, Nikolai Petrovich, chimed in. "Work disciplines a person, gives them purpose in life. Idleness is the worst thing." "Papa," Mikhail tried to intervene, but his father raised a hand to stop him. "No, son, someone has to tell the truth. You've been married for 3 years, and Paulina still hasn't settled into anything." The atmosphere at the table grew increasingly tense. Paulina felt a lump rising in her throat, but kept a calm expression on her face. "Actually, Paulina had interviews last week," Mikhail unexpectedly spoke up, "and pretty successful ones." Vera laughed. "Successful interviews? And how many has she had over the years? 20? 30? For some reason, they're all successful, but there's still no job." Vera, enough, her husband Artem said quietly. What's enough? She snapped indignantly. I'm just saying what everyone's thinking. Paulina either doesn't want to work or is simply incapable of it. And, as a family member, I have the right to voice my concern. A heavy silence hung in the room. Paulina slowly put down her fork, dabbed her lips with a napkin, and looked at Vera calmly. Not everyone can boast successes like yours, Vera, she said. Of course not, Vera replied with triumph in her voice. It takes talent, education, and hard work, not just pretty eyes to snag a husband. Vera, Svetlana Ivanovna and Mikhail exclaimed in unison, but Vera was unstoppable. What, Vera? I'm just telling the truth. Look at her, sitting there like a princess, waiting for everything to fall in her lap. In my department, people like that. Do you know where they'd send them? To retraining courses at best. She laughed maliciously. And honestly, people like you, Paulina, are useless ballast for the family and for society. Paulina exhaled slowly. Inside, everything was churning, but she remained perfectly calm. She'd imagined this moment many times, replaying it in her head like a favorite movie. Maybe you're right, Vera, she said quietly. Not everyone is destined to be as successful as you. Vera smirked smugly, taking the words as surrender, but Paulina wasn't finished. You know, I've long wanted to thank you for your honesty, for always saying what you think. That's a rare quality these days. Vera frowned slightly, unsure where Paulina was going with this. That's exactly why, Paulina continued, taking a sip of juice. I'll be very interested to see your reaction tomorrow morning. What do you mean? Vera tensed, her eyes narrowing. I just think tomorrow will be an enlightening day, Paulina said with a mysterious smile. Mikhail looked at his wife, puzzled. Paulina, what are you talking about? But she only shook her head. Let's just enjoy dinner. Vera's right. We should cherish every moment. For the rest of the evening, Vera kept throwing suspicious glances at Paulina, but didn't bring up the topic of work again. Something in her sister-in-law's demeanor had shifted, and it made her uneasy. When Paulina and Mikhail returned home, he immediately turned to her. What was that? What did you mean by tomorrow being enlightening? Paulina smiled mysteriously. You'll find out soon enough. Everything in its time. Paulina, I'm tired of these secrets. For 3 weeks, you've been going somewhere in the mornings, coming back late, and explaining nothing. What's going on? She walked over to her husband, gently hugged him, and said, Trust me. Tomorrow, you'll understand everything. The next morning, Paulina got up earlier than usual. She carefully chose her outfit, a strict navy blue business suit, a white blouse, minimal jewelry, and tied her hair into a neat bun. Mikhail watched her preparations with bewilderment. You're still not going to tell me where you're going? To work, Paulina replied simply, adjusting her blouse collar in front of the mirror. To work? He smirked skeptically. And when did you manage to find it? 3 weeks ago, she said, turning to him with a serious expression. Remember that interview at Nova Trade? I passed. And not just passed. Mikhail blinked, confused. Nova Trade? But that's where Vera works. Exactly, Paulina said with a smile, fastening her watch on her wrist. And starting today, I'm the head of the new development department, the very one your sister was counting on so much. Mikhail froze, mouth open. You what? But how? Why didn't you say anything? I wanted to make it a surprise. Paulina winked at her husband. Besides, I knew Vera wouldn't miss the chance to mock me at the family dinner, and I was right. Mikhail shook his head, still not believing what he'd heard. So you're Vera's boss now? She's going to be furious. Not necessarily, Paulina shrugged. It all depends on how she reacts. After all, we're professionals, and personal relationships shouldn't affect work. At least, I hope so. She grabbed her bag, kissed her still-stunned husband, and headed for the door. Don't wait up for me early. There's a lot of work ahead today. And yes, whether you call your sister or not, it's up to you. With those words, Paulina left the apartment, feeling an unprecedented surge of strength and confidence. Today marked the beginning of a new chapter in her life. The Nova Trade Company office was located in a modern business center in the heart of the city. Paulina entered the spacious lobby, greeted the security guard, and took the elevator to the 5th floor. Her assistant, who had been assigned to her, met her there. Everyone's already gathered in the conference room, waiting only for you. Thank you, Marina. Are the documents for the meeting ready? Yes, everything's as you requested. And also, the CEO wants to see you after the meeting. Paulina nodded and headed to the conference room. Her heart was beating faster than usual. Today, she would officially meet her new team, including Vera. At the conference room door, Paulina paused for a moment, took a deep breath, and squared her shoulders. I've got this, she thought, then decisively pushed the door open. In the spacious room, about 10 people were seated around a long table. All conversations stopped instantly, and every gaze turned to the entering Paulina. At the far end of the table, she spotted Vera, pale, with a frozen expression of shock on her face. Good morning, colleagues, Paulina said confidently, making her way to her seat at the head of the table. Thank you all for being punctual. As you already know, my name is Paulina Sergeevna, and starting today, I'm heading the new development department. She spread the documents in front of her, quickly scanning the faces of those present. Everyone watched with interest and wariness, as is typical when meeting a new leader. Today, we'll discuss the development strategy for the upcoming quarter, Paulina continued. I'd like to get to know each of you personally. Let's do a quick round of introductions. Name, position, and a brief description of what you do in the company. The employees began introducing themselves one by one. When it was Vera's turn, Paulina noticed her nervously fidgeting with her pen. Vera Nikolaevna, she said dryly, avoiding direct eye contact, senior sales manager, 5 years with the company. I handle corporate clients and train new employees. Thank you, Vera Nikolaevna, Paulina nodded, as if meeting her for the first time. For what I understand, you have excellent performance metrics. I'm looking forward to productive collaboration. Vera twitched the corner of her mouth in what could pass for a smile and lowered her eyes. The meeting lasted about 2 hours. Paulina presented the development plan, outlined key goals, and assigned tasks to each department. She spoke confidently and professionally, occasionally asking questions of the employees. Vera didn't utter a word the entire time unless directly addressed. When the meeting concluded, Paulina gathered her documents and addressed the group. Thank you all for your attention. I'll send out individual tasks to each of you throughout the day. For now, I'd like Vera Nikolaevna to stay behind to clarify some details regarding the client base. The employees began filing out of the conference room, some casting curious glances at Vera, who sat motionless, lips tightly pressed together. When the door closed behind the last employee, a heavy silence filled the room. Paulina didn't rush to start the conversation. She methodically gathered her documents, giving Vera time to compose herself. Finally, Vera couldn't hold back any longer. Is this some kind of joke? Her voice trembled with suppressed anger. Did you orchestrate all this to humiliate me? Paulina looked at her calmly. What exactly did I orchestrate, Vera? That I passed a competitive selection among 50 candidates? Or that I have 2 higher degrees and experience in international companies, something you never bothered to find out about? Vera jumped up from her chair. Don't pretend it's a coincidence. You knew perfectly well where I work, and yesterday you knew everything and stayed silent while she faltered, baring her teeth in frustration. Our personal relationships have no place at work, Paulina said with a bitter smile. Oh, now you're talking about professional ethics? Yesterday, you were saying people like me are dead weight for society. You know, I kept quiet about my new job for 3 weeks precisely because I knew you'd be reporting to me. I wanted to prepare myself mentally to figure out how to structure our working relationship so personal dislikes wouldn't affect the outcome. She walked to the window, gazing at the cityscape. And you know what? I decided I won't do anything. Neither take revenge on you nor give you any special treatment at work. To me, you're just an employee with your strengths and weaknesses, nothing more, nothing less. Vera stayed silent, nervously tapping her nails on the table. As for last night, Paulina continued, turning to face Vera. Yes, I could have told you about the new job right away. But after 3 years of constant humiliation from you, I'll admit, I wanted to see your face when you realized who your new boss is. She stepped closer to Vera. That wasn't professional of me, I agree, and for that, I apologize. But you need to understand, our relationship changes starting now. At work, I'm your manager, and I expect the appropriate attitude. As for family gatherings, it's up to you. We can keep pretending to tolerate each other if you want. Vera finally looked up, her eyes a mix of anger, shame, and confusion. Do you think I'm going to grovel before you, beg for forgiveness? No, Vera, Paulina replied calmly. I don't expect groveling or apologies. I expect professionalism at work and basic respect in the family. Nothing more but nothing less. She gathered her documents and headed for the door. You have until the end of the day to think things over. Tomorrow, I expect your report on current clients and suggestions for attracting new ones. If you decide you can't work under my leadership, I'll understand and help arrange a transfer to another department. The choice is yours. With that, Paulina left the conference room, leaving Vera stunned. The day flew by in a whirlwind of meetings and getting acquainted with her new role. Her office gradually emptied as most employees headed home. She was about to do the same when there was a knock at her door. Vera stood in the doorway, holding a folder of documents, her face calm but tense. "May I?" she asked, not crossing the threshold. Paulina nodded, gesturing to the chair across from her. "Of course, come in." Vera sat down and handed over the folder. "I prepared the report today, so as not to delay it." "Thank you," Paulina said, taking the folder and skimming its contents. "Very thorough. Do you always prepare reports this meticulously?" "Always," Vera replied with a hint of pride. "I really am a good specialist." Paulina looked up from the documents. "I know. That's why you're here. The company doesn't keep professionals for nothing." An awkward pause hung between them. Vera took a deep breath and spoke. "Listen, I'm not going to apologize for yesterday. Not because I don't think I was wrong, but because," she faltered, searching for words, "because apologies won't change anything. I said what I thought, or what I thought. She gave a wry chuckle. Paulina listened silently, not interrupting. "I always thought you were just avoiding responsibility, hiding behind this search for your path," Vera continued. "It seemed to me that you were using my brother, and yes, I was angry. I always had to fight for everything, for education, for work, for respect. While you always seemed so carefree, like everything came to you easily." She paused, gathering her thoughts. "But today, I saw you in a different light. I saw how you led the meeting with the employees. That wasn't the person I knew, or thought I knew." Paulina leaned back in her chair, studying her sister-in-law's face intently. "You know what your main mistake is, Vera? You always judge by appearances. If someone doesn't shout about their achievements, it means they don't exist. If they don't complain about difficulties, it means there aren't any." She sighed. "You never asked why I acted the way I did. It never occurred to you that I turned down offers because they didn't match my professional ambitions, that I didn't want to take just any job for the sake of checking a box. I work." Vera lowered her eyes. "No, it didn't occur to me," she admitted quietly. "And now what? Am I supposed to come to work every day and look into the eyes of someone I've been insulting for 3 years? How do you think that's possible?" Paulina thought for a moment, tapping her pen on the desk. "You know, in business, you often have to work with people you don't like. It's part of professionalism, being able to separate the personal from the professional. I've already said I'm not going to single you out, for better or worse, at work. To me, you're just another employee like everyone else." She paused, then added, "As for family gatherings, I think we're mature enough not to make scene for the sake of Mikhail and your parents." Vera nodded slowly. "Yes, I suppose you're right." She stood up to leave, but paused at the door. "You know, you're not the person I thought you were." "That's interesting." With those words, she left, leaving Paulina lost in thought. When Paulina returned home, Mikhail greeted her eagerly. "So how did it go?" Was Vera furious? Paulina smiled tiredly, slipping off her shoes. "Surprisingly, no. There was shock at first, but then we talked like adults." She walked to the kitchen and poured herself a glass of water. "You know, I've hated family gatherings for 3 years because of Vera. Every time, I prepare myself like it was a battle. But today, I realized we just didn't know each other." Mikhail let out a skeptical hum. "Are you saying you and Vera are best friends now?" Paulina laughed. "Of course not. But maybe we'll finally learn to respect each other, at least professionally, for sure. She walked over to her husband and hugged him. Sorry I didn't tell you about the job earlier. I wanted to be sure it would work out. Mikhail hugged her back. It's fine. The important thing is that it's all resolved now, and I won't have to be torn between my wife and my sister at family dinners anymore. They both laughed, and Paulina felt the tension slip away. By the way, your mom called, Mikhail said. Vera already told her everything. Paulina raised an eyebrow. And what did she say? That she's very proud of you and already ordered a cake to celebrate your promotion this weekend. He smiled. Looks like you're the favorite daughter-in-law now. Paulina shook her head. Did I really have to become Vera's boss for that? Apparently so. Mikhail shrugged. Dad called too. Said he always believed in you. Of course. Paulina rolled her eyes. Especially when he called me a slacker. They walked into the living room and sat on the couch. Mikhail took his wife's hand. You know, I owe you an apology too. I didn't always stand up for you when Vera started her attacks. I thought you'd sort it out yourselves. Women's stuff, typical guy logic. Paulina smiled without malice. She's your sister, and you were caught between two fires. Still, you should have supported me more, she insisted. I promise I will from now on, Mikhail said. Paulina rested her head on his shoulder. The main thing is we got through it. And you know what's the most surprising? I thought I'd gloat seeing Vera's face at the meeting. I imagined that moment hundreds of times. But when it happened, I almost felt sorry for her. Mikhail looked at his wife in surprise. Sorry for Vera? After everything she said to you? Paulina paused, choosing her words. When you finally get what you've dreamed of, sometimes you realize it's not what you needed. I wanted to make Vera feel small and insignificant, the way she made me feel. But when I saw her confused face, I realized it didn't bring me joy or satisfaction, just relief from the resentment. She sighed. At some point, someone has to take a step toward reconciliation. Otherwise, we'll just keep wasting our lives on mutual dislike. Mikhail kissed her gently on the forehead. You're wiser than I thought, and much wiser than Vera. I'm not sure about wisdom, Paulina chuckled. I'm just tired of conflicts. I want to finally enjoy family gatherings, not dread them. Over the next week, Paulina threw herself into her new responsibilities, getting acquainted with projects and meeting clients. Contrary to expectations, Vera worked professionally and efficiently, not trying to sabotage or undermine her new boss in any way. Gradually, their working relationship began to improve. They still kept things formal, but they could calmly discuss projects and even occasionally joke during team meetings. One day, Paulina stayed late, working on an important presentation. She thought she was alone in the office when there was a knock at her door. Yes? She responded, not looking up from her computer screen. Vera appeared in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. Thought you could use this, she said, placing one on Paulina's desk. You've been here 4 hours straight without a break. Paulina looked up at her sister-in-law, surprised. Thanks. And what are you still doing at the office? Vera shrugged. Decided to finish today so it wouldn't drag into Monday. She paused, as if doubting whether to continue the conversation, but then said anyway, I looked over the previous version of your presentation. It's very impressive, but in the second section, there are some inaccuracies in the numbers. Paulina frowned, opening the file in question. Where exactly? Vera came closer, pointing at the screen. Right here. These data are outdated. I have fresher analytics for this market segment. Paulina reviewed the section and realized Vera was right. Damn, you're right. They gave me an old report. Can I help update the numbers? Vera offered, sipping her coffee. I've got everything in a summary table. It'll take 20 minutes max. Paulina looked at her sister-in-law closely, trying to figure out if there was some catch, but Vera's face showed only professional interest. I'd be grateful, Paulina nodded. This presentation could land the company a serious contract. I know, Vera said, sitting down beside her and starting to type quickly. I handled the preliminary negotiations with this client. They're very promising but demanding. They worked together for about an hour, making edits, discussing the presentation strategy. Paulina noted with surprise how Vera's professional knowledge complemented her own. They perfectly offset each other's weaknesses. Vera had an excellent grasp of the market's details and nuances. When they finished, it was almost 10 p.m. Now it's perfect, Vera said with satisfaction, reviewing the final version. With this presentation, the contract's in the bag. Paulina smiled gratefully. Thanks for the help. You didn't have to stay late. Vera paused, gathering her things. I was always the first one at work and the last to leave. I thought that made me the best employee, indispensable. And then you came along. She didn't finish the sentence, but Paulina understood. And took the position you were counting on. Vera nodded, not looking at her. Yes, I was sure that spot was mine. 5 years I worked for it. Why didn't they promote you? Paulina asked directly. You've got experience, insider knowledge of the company, good results. Vera smirked. Haven't you figured out yet? They didn't promote me for the same reason. I kept snapping at you all these years. She paused, collecting her thoughts. I'm too harsh. I don't know how to work in a team. I can drive anyone up the wall with my stubborn principles. She chuckled. A good worker, but a lousy leader. That's what the director told me when I asked why they picked an outsider over me. Paulina looked at her sister-in-law in astonishment, seeing her in a completely new light. And how did you feel when you found out that outsider was me? That the universe was mocking me, Vera answered honestly. That it was some cruel punishment for all the not-so-kind things I'd said about you. She looked Paulina straight in the eyes. But you know what's the most frustrating part? The director was right. You're a better leader than I could have been. You know how to listen to people, find compromises, see everyone's strengths. I just line everyone up and demand results at any cost. Paulina hadn't expected such candor. Vera, haven't you thought that those skills can be developed? Teamwork, empathy, listening, all of that can be learned. At my age, Vera snorted skeptically. You're 35, not 95, Paulina laughed. Of course you can. More than that, she paused. I could help you with it if you want, of course. Vera looked at her in surprise. You'd help me? After everything that's happened? Exactly, Paulina nodded. There's this concept, mental generosity. When you share knowledge not because you have to, but because it's the right thing to do. You're an excellent specialist, Vera. With your experience and knowledge, you could achieve so much more working with people, not against them. Vera stayed silent, clearly mulling over what she'd heard. Think about it, Paulina said, starting to pack up her things. We could meet once a week for mentoring sessions, officially as part of staff development program, unofficially as relatives who finally found common ground. Vera gave an uncertain smile. Not sure I deserve that kind of treatment after everything I've said. It's not about deserving, Paulina shrugged. It's about what's right for the company, for both of us, for our family. I'll think about it, Vera finally said, heading for the door. At the exit, she stopped. Thanks for, Paulina nodded. I know. See you Monday. After Vera left, Paulina sat in the empty office for a while, processing this unexpected conversation. Something told her their relationship with her sister-in-law had finally shifted from standstill. On Sunday, there was a family lunch at her mother-in-law's. Paulina drove there with a slight unease. Despite the warming of her work relationship with Vera, she wasn't sure how Vera would act in a family setting. When she and Mikhail entered his parents' apartment, Vera was already there, helping her mother set the table. Here's our business star, her mother-in-law exclaimed, hugging Paulina. I'm so happy for you, dear. To Paulina's surprise, Vera smiled wryly. Mom's been talking about you nonstop for 3 days. How you nailed the presentation, how you signed the contract. Don't exaggerate, Svetlana Ivanovna said, flustered. I'm just proud of our Paulina. Such a success. At the table, the atmosphere was surprisingly relaxed. Mikhail and Vera's father, who used to often side with his daughter in her jabs at Paulina, now asked his daughter-in-law about her work and the company's prospects with interest. And what about Vera? He suddenly asked, turning to Paulina. How's she doing under your leadership? Not rebelling. Paulina noticed Vera tense up, awaiting the answer. Vera is one of the best specialists in the company, Paulina replied confidently. Her experience and market knowledge are invaluable to our department. In fact, thanks to her help, we landed that contract. Vera clearly hadn't expected the praise. Really? Her father asked, skeptical. You two get along at work now. We're professionals first and foremost, Paulina answered diplomatically. And Vera's a very professional employee. Paulina offered me mentoring, Vera added. Now, it was Paulina's turn to be surprised. She hadn't expected Vera to take her offer seriously, let alone mention it. Is that true? Mikhail asked, looking from his wife to his sister. You're really going to work together willingly? Both women laughed. Imagine that, Vera nodded. Turns out there's something I can learn from Paulina, even me. That admission, made at the family table, clearly took Vera some effort. Paulina could see it in her tense posture and slightly trembling hands. Still, it was there. I learn a lot from Vera too, Paulina said, deciding to support her sister-in-law. She's got an amazing grasp of the market and client base. Without that, I wouldn't have gotten up to speed so quickly. Her mother-in-law teared up with emotion. My girls, I'm so happy there'll finally be peace in our family. Mom, don't exaggerate. Vera rolled her eyes. We've just found a professional common ground, and that's already huge progress. Mikhail smiled. I propose a toast to my favorite women, who finally buried the hatchet. Everyone laughed and raised their glasses. After lunch, when the men went to watch football and her mother-in-law busied herself with tea, Paulina and Vera ended up alone in the kitchen. Thanks for what you said about me at the table, Vera said quietly, helping Paulina with the dishes. You could have used the moment to make me look bad. You really are an excellent specialist, Paulina replied. And that presentation was as much your achievement as mine. They worked in silence for a moment, washing dishes. You know what I've been thinking about lately? Vera said suddenly. How much time we wasted on this stupid feud. 3 years. 3 years of sniping at each other. Do you think we could have at least been normal relatives? Paulina asked with some doubt. Vera shrugged. Supporting each other instead of fighting. I didn't even know you had 2 degrees and experience in international companies. I never cared to find out. I didn't know a lot about you either, Paulina admitted. For example, that you're so devoted to your work. That inspires respect. Work has always been everything to me, Vera said quietly. Maybe that's why I lashed out at you so much. It seemed to me that you didn't value what you had, the opportunity to work, to build a career. She paused, wiping the plates. And also, I was probably a little jealous. Jealous of me? Paulina asked, genuinely surprised. Yes, Vera nodded. You and Mikhail have such a relationship. Support, understanding. He never pressured you, never demanded you find a job right away. While my Artyom, she waved her hand. Well, not everything is as smooth as it looks from the outside. Paulina didn't know how to respond. She hadn't expected such openness from her sister-in-law. Sorry, Vera caught herself. I shouldn't have said all that. No, it's fine. Paulina hurried to reassure her. It's just unexpected. I always thought you and Artyom had a perfect relationship. Vera gave a bitter smirk. Nothing perfect exists, especially when a man marries a woman only because she's successful, building a career, and can provide him with a comfortable life. She cut herself off, clearly regretting what she'd said. Sorry, don't pay attention. I'm just tired lately. Paulina looked at her sister-in-law closely. Vera, if you need to talk, really talk, not necessarily now, but I'm ready to listen without judgment. Vera looked surprised, but grateful. I'll think about it. Thank you. At that moment, her mother-in-law peeked into the kitchen. Girls, the tea's ready. Let's go to the living room. They exchanged a glance, silently agreeing to save the serious conversation for later, and followed her mother-in-law. The rest of the evening passed surprisingly pleasantly. For the first time in 3 years, Paulina didn't feel tension in her husband's parents' house. There was no need to choose every word carefully, fearing Vera's sharp comments. It was liberating. When she and Mikhail returned home, he hugged her with a smile. I can't believe you and Vera have finally found common ground. What happened at work? Are you blackmailing her with something? Of course not, Paulina laughed. We just finally saw each other as people, not enemies, and it turns out we have a lot more in common than we thought. I sincerely always hoped you'd get along, Mikhail said. Vera's not as bad as she seems at first glance. She just has a tough personality and, as it turns out, a complicated life, Paulina added quietly, recalling their kitchen conversation. Mikhail raised his eyebrows in surprise. Did she tell you something about herself? About Artyom? A little, Paulina replied evasively. I think she just needs someone she can really talk to. Mikhail nodded thoughtfully. You know, Vera's always been a loner. Even as a kid, she hardly had any friends. She built herself up as strong and independent, never letting anyone close. Maybe she's finally opening up to you. Paulina smiled. Let's not jump to conclusions, but I think we're on the right path. 3 months had passed since that memorable family dinner when Vera had scolded Paulina for being jobless, not suspecting that the next day she'd end up as her subordinate. A lot had changed in that time. Weekly mentoring sessions with Vera grew into something more than just professional guidance. They started talking openly about life, family, and relationship struggles. Paulina learned that Vera's marriage to Artyom was on the brink of divorce. He'd cheated on her, spent her money, and didn't value her as a person at all. Maybe I deserved it, Vera said bitterly during one of their meetings. I always considered myself strong and independent, looked down on others, and in the end, I ended up in a toxic relationship I'm afraid to leave. No one deserves that kind of treatment, Paulina replied firmly. Not you, not anyone. But you know what? You're really strong, stronger than you think. A week after that conversation, Vera filed for divorce. Paulina supported her in that decision, helped her find a good lawyer, and when Artyom started threatening and harassing her, offered Vera a temporary place to stay with her and Mikhail. I can't take advantage of your hospitality like this, Vera resisted. After everything I said to you, stop it, Paulina brushed it off. That's in the past. What matters now is that you're safe. Mikhail backed his wife's decision, and Vera moved in with them for a month while they sorted out the property division and things calmed down. Through this, her sister-in-law revealed a completely new side. Behind the mask of arrogance and sharpness hid a vulnerable woman who was simply afraid to show her weaknesses, who'd spent her whole life trying to prove her worth to her parents, her husband, her colleagues, and in that constant fight for recognition, had lost her true self. Meanwhile, changes were happening at work too. Thanks to Paulina and Vera's joint efforts, their department was showing the best results in the company. The CEO was so impressed with their work that he proposed expanding the department and increasing the budget for new projects. You know, I couldn't have done it without you, Paulina admitted to Vera as they celebrated the achievement in a small cafe near the office. Your knowledge and experience were invaluable. Vera smiled shyly. And I'd never have achieved those results without your leadership. You taught me to work with people, not against them. It completely changed my approach. They sat in silence for a moment, savoring the moment. Well, Paulina raised her teacup to the most unexpected partnership in Nova Trade's history. And to the most unexpected changes in our lives, Vera added, clinking her cup. When Paulina thought back to that fateful family dinner where Vera had berated her for being jobless, calling her worthless and pathetic, she no longer felt resentment. It was an ironic twist of fate that turned an enemy into a friend and toxic relationships into genuine support. Life is unpredictable. You never know how words thrown in anger can change not just someone else's fate, but your own. And sometimes what seems like the end of the road turns out to be the start of a new, more interesting journey. You know what I've been thinking about? Vera asked as they sat in the cafe. Paulina looked at her with interest. About how strange it all turned out. If I hadn't said those awful things at that dinner, if you hadn't ended up as my boss, we'd never have really gotten to know each other. I'd still be living in my little world full of resentment and envy. Paulina smiled. Everything happens the way it's supposed to, at the right time and in the right place.